How do you know when you've found a church? Simple, right? There are cars parked outside. There's a building with a sanctuary of some sort, sometimes simple, sometimes ornate. There are people gathered there for worship and fellowship. There's some kind of clergy present, someone trained to interpret and proclaim the Bible. Yep, you know a church when you found one. Indeed, many of us grew up with the little nursery rhyme, "Here's the church, here's the steeple, open the doors and see all the people." Problem is, not all churches fit that definition, at least not exactly. Turns out, it's not as easy to define the church as you might think. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your daily devotional for Saturday, September 23rd, 2023. Theologians can sometimes focus on things that the average Christian doesn't care a thing about, and they can come off as a bit, shall we say, pedantic. Spending time and effort to define what a church is seems like an excellent example of pedanticism at its very worst. But it's actually a pretty important discussion, and one that divides different wings of the church. As a way to define the church, theologians have traditionally talked about the notes or marks of the church. The idea is to get away from superficial elements like buildings, steeples, and other common trappings we associate with the church. The traditional notes or marks of the church you know actually pretty well. We repeat them every time we recite the Nicene Creed. We believe in one holy Catholic and apostolic church. Embedded in this statement are four marks: unity, holiness, Catholicity or universality, and apostolicity or continuity with the teaching of the early apostles, especially Peter. These are important elements in the church, though we Protestants, and typically we Reformed Christians, understand things differently from our Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox sisters and brothers, and we don't define the marks of the church quite this way. We do think of the church as one, but not the way the Catholics and Orthodox do. They generally believe that the unity of the church is tied to its organization. The Roman Catholic Church, for example, sees membership in that body to define the church's unity, and the unity is defined by its clergy. We Reformed Christians, on the other hand, tie our unity not to our method of organization or to the clergy, but to our common belief in Jesus Christ. The holiness of the church simply means that God has set apart the church for a particular purpose. Doesn't mean that we are somehow pristine, faultless, sinless people, or that our church organizations are perfect. It simply means that God has called us for a purpose and set us apart for that purpose. The Catholicity of the church for us is similar to the idea of the church's unity. Notice that in the Creed, the word Catholic is spelled with a small c. We're not talking about the Roman Catholic Church here. We're talking about the universal church, the church that exists in many forms around the world and through time. For us, to proclaim the Catholicity of the church is to profess our belief that the church, the whole church, transcends doctrinal differences and differences in church government. It is a church that includes Roman Catholic, Eastern Orthodox, Protestants, Anabaptists, and all other kinds of groups. Taken together, we are the church. Probably the biggest difference between Protestant and Roman Catholic or Orthodox understandings is in the area of the church's apostolicity. For Roman Catholics, Orthodox, and Anglican Christians, apostolicity means a direct and unbroken line of ordination of bishops, beginning with St. Peter himself. Recall Jesus' words when he gathered his disciples at Caesarea Philippi, and this is where that idea comes from. Jesus says, "I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church." Roman Catholics, as well as Eastern Orthodox and Anglican churches, take this to mean that every bishop who has been consecrated by an unbroken line of people directly from Peter defines the church. Most Protestants, including us in the Reformed tradition, do not understand apostolicity in this way. For us, apostolicity has to do with the degree to which our proclamation, our preaching and teaching adhere to the teachings of the apostles. In other words, It's not about whether there's an unbroken chain of ordination and consecration of bishops and clergy, but whether the teaching of the church conforms to the teachings of the apostles. So, those are the 4 traditional marks of the church, but without rejecting the truth of these 4 marks as we understand them, we Reformed Christians take a definition of the church a little differently. For us, there are 2, or sometimes 3 notes or marks of the church. The first 2 that most all Reformed confessions claim are the right preaching of the Word of God and the proper administration of the sacraments. To these 2, one of our confessions, the Scots Confession, includes ecclesiastical discipline uprightly administered. But for our purposes, it's the first 2, right preaching and sacraments, that are sufficient to define the church. These fully encompass the 4 traditional marks. So how do you know you're in a church? Yeah, it's not about the building. It's not about a steeple. It's not about colorful paraments or Sunday school classes or vibrant youth groups or any of the other myriad things we think of when we think of the church. It is the preaching of the Word and the administration of the sacraments. And by the way, the formal title of a minister in the Presbyterian Church reflects exactly this. We are known as ministers of Word and Sacrament. When we return next week, we'll continue building our theological vocabulary with a term we frequently use but don't often examine, original sin. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.